In this section, we will be looking at Puppet Lookup. In this video, we will be looking at automatic parameter lookup. Parameters are how we pass variables to classes. So when we define parameters for a class, we use the full scope of the variable to reference. So we had a class called role, a class called CMS, and inside the CMS class, we have these two variables. When we want to actually reference them, we reference them with the colon. So we say role, : CMS, : doc root. And this will refer directly to that variable inside the class. This is the variable that we defined earlier. So to look at these, we need to use Puppet Lookup. So Puppet Lookup is a system where we use to separate the data in our code from the code. So when you have values that are dependent on facts on the system, you can use lookup to separate that data out from your code. We'll start with a very simple example in the next section, and we'll expand on how to use a hierarchy to apply your Puppet code differently on different hosts. But in this section, we're just going to start with a simple hierarchy. So in our production environment, so we're in this directory, we're going to have a hira.yaml file, and this will specify how lookup is configured. And hira is the old name for lookup, and it's still used in several places. So you'll see this in a few places, hira, but the newer function is called lookup. So we specify version 5, and that's important. We start with 3 dashes because it's a YAML file, and then we say the version is 5 because the default is actually version 3 for backwards compatibility. So we want to make sure that hira knows that we are using 5. Then the default, I've actually got them all commented out here, but this would be where the directory to go and look for the YAML files, and the data hash says I wish to use YAML files. And the next thing is the hierarchy. And each level of the hierarchy can have its own set of path or paths. So I've shown both ways of configuring this. So this has a single path, and this will look for files by the name of, so in the data directory, which is defined here, then nodes, and then the client cert, and then .yaml. The other thing I look for is just a common level. So I say common. So this would be /data/common.yaml. That's our entire hira.yaml file, and it's in this production environment. So now let's go look in that data directory. So that's in this production environment, and I've already got a common.yaml. So let's look at that. Let's just move the common.yaml into place. And then what I want to do is just look at that. And what I've done is I've said role : CMS : doc root will be set to var ww from common. Now, if we remember in the modules, role, manifests, and then CMS, the doc root should be var ww and then web host. But if we look it up, and we're going to use Puppet Lookup to look this up now. So we'll say Puppet Lookup role : CMS : doc root. And we'll see that now that value is coming from here. Now, if you wanted to know how Puppet came up with that value, you can say -- explain. And what Puppet will do is print out as it searches through the hierarchy for files. So we can see that it's looking for nodes, Puppet example.com.yaml. It didn't find it. It looked for the common.yaml file. It found it, and then it looked for this value in there, and it found it. And this was the value that it found. And this is very useful when you want to figure out how Puppet came up with a value from lookup or from hira. Let's say we wanted to have a different value for our Ubuntu machine. So let's go to the nodes directory, and we'll see I have a file ready to go, and I'm just going to move it. I meant to say move. So we're going to say move it. Okay, so now that file's directory, what does this actually say? This says that I want it to be from nodes Ubuntu. But how do I check it from the Puppet machine? Puppet Lookup also has another function where I can say Puppet Lookup, and then I can say --node ubuntu.example, spell it right, .com, and then look up the value, role : CMS : doc root. And we can see that now, because I said pretend that you're the node ubuntu.example.com and look it up, and we can see that yes, this is the value we expect. What does this mean when we go to our Ubuntu machine? We'll see that the doc root will now come from this lookup value, and it'll change. So all of these locations that we used previously are going to be overwritten by this new value that we got from the Puppet lookup. So you'll see everything's getting changed to that new directory. Instead of var www ubuntu, it's going to from there ubuntu. So if we go to var www, we'll see that now there's this from nodes ubuntu directory, and in that from nodes ubuntu, that's our WordPress installation. So that's how easy it is to move things around using lookup. And that also brings up another thing about scope. And when we want to reference variables between classes, we can use scope. So let's go up 2 directories into our modules directory. And I've made an example in role manifests and the scope manifest. And in here, I've defined this class role : scope. And I've given it a parameter of example. So this is a parameter that I can reference by saying role : scope : example. So how would we use that? Well, we've got an example here. And the thing is, to use this variable, I have to have this class in my catalog. So I have to say include this, but once it's included, I can now reference it. So I can say the role : scope : example is, and then I give, this is how I reference it. You know, you have to do a $, brace, then the full path to the variable and close it. So what happens when we say Puppet apply root scope.pp? It's going to pull in that value. It's going to pull in the include, and then it's going to pull in that value. So we'll see that a scoped variable, which is what we saw right here, is getting passed in. And furthermore, if we had something in hybrid data that specified role : scope : example, it would pull that as well. It would go and look that up in data and pass it back to us. And doing things like that, you can actually greatly simplify your code based on a nice hierarchy.